So you just finished like a grueling multi-year project at work. Or, maybe you finally survived this chaotic 5-day cross-country road trip with 3 screaming kids in the back seat.
Oh, that sounds awful.
Right. The absolute worst. But you drop your bags, you look at your friends, and you say, man, that was an absolute odyssey.
Yeah, we hear it all the time.
You really think you're comparing yourself to this noble, enduring hero, but linguistically, you actually just compared yourself to a deeply toxic trickster that everybody absolutely hates.
It is such an incredible historical irony.
Yeah.
I mean, we use this word as the ultimate badge of honor.
Right.
For surviving something massive.
Yeah.
Completely unaware of the really dark baggage attached to the original character.
Well, welcome to today's deep dive. We are looking at a fascinating stack of sources today. A brilliant linguistic essay combined with some really deep historical analyses of ancient Greek literature to unpack the 2,700-year-old story behind the word Odyssey.
It's a great topic.
It is. Our mission here is to figure out how a character who is fundamentally defined by deceit and arrogance became the namesake for our most triumphant journeys.
And to do that, we really have to trace this term all the way back to a 7th century BC text, and we're going to uncover a linguistic mystery that completely flips our modern understanding of the word on its head.
Okay, let's unpack this, because to really grasp the ancient origins of this word, we actually need to start by looking at how incredibly recent our modern use of it is.
Right.
Because it feels like a word that has just always existed in the English dictionary to mean, a long, exhausting trip.
I mean, the reality is completely different. The figurative use of odyssey as a generic noun, meaning a wide-ranging quest or a complex journey that only emerged in the English language in the 19th century.
The 19th century?
Yeah, quite late.
That is practically yesterday in the grand scheme of language. Are you saying that before the 1800s, nobody was going on an odyssey? Like, George Washington didn't go on an odyssey.
Well, they certainly were going on long trips, but they definitely weren't calling them that.
Wow.
Because before the 19th century, the word had a very strict singular definition. It was exclusively a proper noun.
So it only meant one thing.
Exactly. It referred strictly to the famous epic poem written by the ancient Greek poet Homer, which was believed to have been composed around the 7th century BC. And the entire 24-chapter narrative is dedicated to one specific legendary figure, Odysseus, the king of Ithaca.
So the title of the poem is literally just his name. It's his specific story.
Yeah, and it's a story that starts with massive reluctance, actually. Because Odysseus became heavily embroiled in the infamous Trojan War, originally as a suitor of Helen of Troy and later as one of her protectors.
Right, the Trojan War.
But he did not want to go to this war at all. He fought tooth and nail to avoid it.
Wait, really? The guy whose name is literally synonymous with epic quests didn't even want to go on one? Was he just, scared of combat?
No, it wasn't a standard fear of battle. I mean, he was a very capable warrior. His reluctance stemmed from a specific prophecy.
Oh, there's always a prophecy.
Always a prophecy. He was warned that if he sailed to Troy, he would face this brutal, agonizingly long journey home, losing all his men along the way.
So he knew it was coming.
He did. So when the Greek fleet called him up, he actually pretended to be insane.
Wait, how do you pretend to be insane back then?
He started plowing a field with an ox and a donkey yoked together, which makes no sense, and he was sowing the ground with salt. Just totally destroying his own fields just to get out of the draft.
I just have to pause and marvel at this timeline for a second. Okay, so the poem is written in the 7th century BC. He literally fakes insanity to avoid the trip.
Yep.
And it takes until the 19th century, over 2.5 millennia later, for people to start using the title of this reluctant guy's specific poem as a regular, everyday word for a long trip.
It really is bizarre.
It is literally like if, in the year 4500, people started calling a really bad, chaotic day at the office a die-hard.
That is the perfect analogy.
Yeah.
We took this highly specific, character-driven narrative about one man's cursed attempt to get home. We filed off the serial numbers and just turned it into a generic descriptor for our own lives.
Sorry, I'm late to dinner. The commute was an absolute diehard. I love it.
It really works.
It totally works. So we've established it took 2,500 years for the word to evolve, but what about the actual 10-year journey? Because how Homer paces that time it completely shatters our idea of what a typical quest actually looks like.
Right, because the prophecy he was so terrified of, it comes absolutely true. The journey takes him 10 agonizing years, and this is after a 10-year war.
Oh man, 20 years total.
But Homer does not start the poem at the beginning of the voyage.
Which is wild, because when you hear someone has been on a 10-year journey, you expect the story to start at the moment they set sail, right?
Naturally,
Like day one, facing the open ocean, the wind in their hair, all that.
Homer bypasses all of that entirely. He employs this highly sophisticated narrative structure, dropping the audience in media res, right into the middle of things.
Right in the thick of it.
Exactly. The poem picks up heavily into his homeward voyage. When we join the plot, Odysseus isn't battling monsters or sailing through storms. He is entirely stagnant.
Stagnant.
Yeah, he is stranded and being held captive on the island of the sea nymph Calypso.
And he hasn't just, washed up there either. He has been sitting on that island for 7 years when the story actually opens.
7 years. The actual real-time action of this massive 24-chapter poem only covers the very tail end of his ordeal.
Yeah.
We are merely witnessing the last month or so of his homecoming in the present tense.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting, because today we think of an Odyssey as this relentless A to B slog where you are just constantly pushing forward against the elements.
Pushing and pushing, right?
Yeah, exactly. But the original text, the very blueprint for the word, is structured like a movie that starts right in the third act, while the main character is just sitting on a beach, completely stuck and crying out to sea.
What's fascinating here is how Homer manages to deliver the grand adventure we still expect. Because if the present-day narrative is just him stuck on an island and then making a final push for home, how do we get all the rich mythology?
Right, where are the monsters?
The answer is that the bulk of the famous pulse-pounding action is told entirely through Odysseus's own reminiscences.
It's essentially a giant flashback sequence.
That's exactly what it is.
He's telling a captive audience about everything he survived. And let's look at the actual mechanics of what he survives in these flashbacks, because it starts to reveal who he really is. The source material outlines this crazy highlight reel of trauma.
Oh, absolutely. A literal trip into the underworld. A civilization of giant cannibals.
Yeah, no.
A treacherous, ship-swallowing whirlpool called Charybdis. It's intense.
But the way he survives these encounters is what really stands out to me. Take the Cyclops, Polyphemus.
Oh, that's a classic example.
Right. Odysseus and his men get trapped in the monster's cave. The Cyclops just starts eating the men, 2 by 2. A traditional hero, like an Achilles or a Hercules, would probably challenge the monster to single combat or, try to lift the boulder, blocking the door through sheer strength. But what does Odysseus do?
He uses manipulation and wordplay. That's his weapon.
He doesn't even try to fight him fairly.
Not at all. Odysseus offers the Cyclops highly concentrated, unwatered wine to get him dead drunk. And when the monster asks for his name, Odysseus says his name is Nobody, or Autis in ancient Greek.
Nobody. It's so sneaky.
And once the Cyclops passes out from the wine, Odysseus and his men drive a sharpened, burning stake into his single eye, completely blinding him.
Which is gruesome enough on its own, but the true brilliance is in the fake name. Because when the blinded Cyclops starts screaming in agony, the other Cyclops on the island rush outside his cave and ask who is hurting him. And what does he yell back?
He yells, "Nobody is killing me! Nobody is hurting me!"
It's like a bad comedy sketch.
It is. So the other monsters shrug and walk away, assuming it's just a plague sent by the gods. They don't help him.
It's a completely underhanded, deceptive tactic. It's brilliant for survival, obviously, but it's deeply cynical. He wins through deceit, not through valor.
And we see that exact same cynical survivalism with the sirens.
Oh, yeah.
These are monstrous women whose beautiful singing drives sailors to steer their ships into the rocks and drown. Odysseus wants to hear the song because he's intensely curious, but he obviously doesn't want to die.
So he just cheats the system.
He totally cheats. He has his crew plug their own ears with beeswax so they're completely deaf to the song, and then he orders them to tie him tightly to the ship's mast.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so he gets to experience the forbidden temptation without paying the price, while his men do all the manual labor of rowing him to safety.
You really start to build a picture of a guy who relies on loopholes. He survives this gauntlet of supernatural horrors by out-tricking them. So you picture this guy surviving giants, cannibals, the literal realm of the dead.
Yeah.
All of these flashbacks build up to the actual present-day climax of the story when he finally reaches the shores of his homeland, Ithaca. I would expect the final boss battle to be like a dragon or maybe a rogue sea god trying to sink his ship one last time.
You'd think so, but the climax of the Odyssey actually abandons mythology entirely.
Wait, really? No magic?
No magic. The final confrontation isn't a battle with supernatural monsters. It is a deeply intimate, shockingly violent domestic dispute.
Calling it a domestic dispute almost feels like an understatement. I mean, he gets home after 20 years away, 10 at war, 10 lost at sea. And what does he actually find?
He discovers his royal household has been occupied by over 100 unwanted suitors.
Over 100?
Yeah, these men are young nobles from the surrounding islands. They assume Odysseus is dead, so they have just moved into his palace. They are eating all his livestock, drinking his wine.
The audacity.
And their ultimate goal is to force his devoted queen, Penelope, into marriage so they can permanently steal his kingdom.
It's just a massive home invasion, but again, look at how Odysseus handles this. He doesn't march up to the front gates, announce his return, and challenge their leaders to a duel for his honor.
Not at all. That would be way too risky, and honestly too straightforward for him.
Right.
With the help of the goddess Athena, he physically disguises himself as an elderly, wandering beggar. He infiltrates his own home.
Undercover in his own house.
Yeah, exactly. He spends days in this disguise, enduring insults and physical abuse from the suitors, carefully scoping out the architecture, testing the loyalty of his servants, and figuring out exactly who is against him.
He's literally running reconnaissance in his own living room. And once he has the layout, he orchestrates a complete bloodbath.
He really does.
He has his loyal servants hide all the suitors' weapons. He locks the doors of the Great Hall so no one can escape. And then he drops the disguise, picks up his bow, and systematically slaughters over 100 unarmed men in a confined space.
The text describes the scene with brutal detail. It is a methodical massacre.
It's terrifying.
He doesn't just chase them out or exile them, he exterminates them, piling the bodies in the hall, and then he forces the disloyal servants to clean up the blood before executing them as well.
This is the part that genuinely disturbs me. I want you, the listener, to picture this scenario.
Yeah.
You spend 10 years using every ounce of willpower to survive sorceresses and giant cannibals, supposedly driven by pure love for your family.
Oh, yeah.
And your triumphant homecoming involves locking the doors and committing premeditated mass murder against over 100 men who, frankly, were terrible house guests, but they weren't supernatural monsters. Does this level of extreme calculated violence actually align with our traditional idea of a noble hero?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, that brutal, cunning approach to solving his domestic problem is not an anomaly. It is the core defining characteristic of Odysseus.
It's who he is.
He operates in the shadows. He uses disguises. He strikes when his enemies are defenseless. And this perfectly sets the stage for the true hidden meaning of his name, which etymologists and historians have debated for years.
Okay, the linguistic mystery. This is the part of the source material that completely shifted my perspective. We toss the word Odyssey around so casually, but the root of the word, the actual meaning of the name Odysseus, is a puzzle that goes incredibly deep.
It's a puzzle whose origins are really hazy. It doesn't trace back to a simple standard Greek root.
Really?
No, the name appears in variant forms across different ancient dialects, and scholars even suggest it might have pre-Greek roots, meaning the word predates the organized Greek language itself.
That is ancient language. But despite that haziness, scholars have honed in on a leading theory for what Odysseus actually translates to, and it is arguably the most surprising twist in this entire narrative.
The leading theory is that his name is connected to an ancient Greek verb, odusomai, which literally means to hate or to be angry against.
To hate.
To hate. And this isn't just modern scholars projecting backwards. Homer himself playfully references this meaning in the original text.
Wait, really? Homer knew?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
At one point, Odysseus' grandfather explicitly says he is naming the boy Odysseus because he, the grandfather, is at odds with so many people. He is acknowledging the dark root of his protagonist's name right on the page.
Wait, so Odysseus literally means to hate, which makes it a linguistic relative of English words like odium and odious, right? Words that mean repulsive, detestable, or extremely unpleasant.
Yes, the epic of the Odyssey is fundamentally tied to the concept of being odious.
So what does this all mean? Why on earth would an author setting out to write a 24-chapter epic poem name his main protagonist the guy we are supposed to be rooting for through 10 years of suffering after the concept of hate?
It's a great question.
I mean, you don't write a massive blockbuster action movie and name the good guy John Detestable.
No, you definitely don't. Why would a major character, a king and a warrior, gain such an overwhelmingly negative name? The answer lies in how Odysseus operates and how he is perceived by the world around him.
Okay.
The Oxford English Dictionary provides a really vital piece of interpretation here. They note that the root of his name implies he was, quote, hated by gods and men.
Hated by gods and men. That is an incredibly heavy label to carry around.
But he earned it through his actions. Because Odysseus is not a traditional hero. He doesn't rely on unwavering morality or sheer physical strength to win the day. He relies on his reputation as a hubristic trickster.
A hubristic trickster. He's arrogant and he's deceitful.
He has a deep fondness for using manipulation. He outsmarts the Cyclops with a fake name. He uses disguises to test his own wife's loyalty before revealing himself.
Which is pretty messed up, honestly.
Very. He sneaks into his own home to slaughter the suitors rather than challenging them in the open.
He's not the knight in shining armor kicking down the front door. He's like the hacker who sneaks in through the back door while everyone is distracted. Which, from a sheer survival standpoint against impossible odds, is incredibly smart.
Sure.
But from a likability standpoint, it makes him toxic.
This raises an important question about how we classify this story. For centuries, we have placed the Odyssey at the very top of the pedestal of the hero's journey.
Right, it's the gold standard.
But looking at the root of his name and his heavy reliance on deceit, the text can be far more accurately seen as an anti-hero's grand journey home.
An anti-hero, so he's less Superman and more like Walter White or Tony Soprano.
Exactly. The very traits that kept him alive, his deception, his trickery, his monumental arrogance, are the exact same traits that made him fundamentally odious to the gods who ruled the seas.
Especially Poseidon.
Exactly. Poseidon hunted him for blinding the Cyclops, and he was odious to the men who fought beside him, most of whom died because of his reckless curiosity. He survived because he was willing to be hated.
It is honestly like finding out that a beloved, iconic superhero actually has a name that translates to the toxic guy everyone dislikes.
Right.
It forces you to look past the monsters and the magic and see the deeply flawed, manipulative human right at the center of the narrative.
We celebrate the journey so much, but we completely ignore the treacherous nature of the traveler.
Which brings up an incredible irony for you, the listener. Think about the last time you proudly called one of your own difficult projects or a messy life transition an odyssey.
Oh, yeah.
You say it with your chest puffed out, expecting everyone to recognize your nobility and endurance, but unwittingly, you are actually comparing yourself to a deceitful, arrogant trickster who left a trail of furious gods and murdered enemies in his wake.
It completely recontextualizes every time we use the word.
It really does. So let's take a breath and recap the wild ride of this deep dive because we have covered a massive amount of ground today.
We really have.
We started with the realization that the generic word odyssey, meaning a long trip, is actually a relatively recent 19th century invention in the English language.
We then traveled back 2,700 years to the 7th century BC, exploring Homer's incredibly modern, media res storytelling that drops us right into the middle of the action with a man stranded on an island.
We looked at the how and the why of his survival in those flashback sequences. He didn't overpower the Cyclops. He manipulated him with the nobody loophole.
Yeah.
He didn't outswim the sirens. He tied himself to a mast to cheat death.
And we arrived at the shockingly bloody domestic climax, where he used a disguise to lock the doors and execute 100 suitors in his own dining hall.
All of which perfectly explain the core linguistic mystery, the undeniable link between the name Odysseus and the ancient Greek root for hate, revealing our ultimate traveler not as a pure hero, but as an odious, hubristic trickster.
It's quite a shift.
It changes everything about how I view that word. But before we wrap up, I know you have been looking at the implications of his original prophecy, and you have a final thought to leave us with based on the source material.
I do. It is something to mull over that draws directly from the tension between his initial reluctance to go to Troy and the very personality traits that define him.
Okay, let's hear it.
Think about this man. Odysseus only went to the Trojan War because he was forced to, despite a prophecy warning him of a long, terrible journey home. But his nature as a hubristic trickster is exactly what led him to blind Poseidon's son, the Cyclops,
Right.
which is what ultimately made him hated by gods and men. So did his over-reliance on cunning and arrogance actually cause the agonizing 10-year punishment he was trying so hard to avoid?
Oh, wow. Like a self-fulfilling prophecy brought on by his own inability to just walk away without outsmarting someone?
Precisely. So the next time you find yourself bogged down on a long, frustrating odyssey of your own making, take a step back and ask yourself, are you playing the noble hero, or are you just being a hubristic trickster getting in your own way?
That is going to stick with me for a long time. Are you the hero or are you the trickster? Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. And to you listening, keep questioning the hidden histories of the words you use every single day, because as we've seen, sometimes the things we think are heroic are actually rooted in something a little bit odious. Until next time.